You ready?
I'm gonna tell you guys what to do the pledge.
All right, ready? All right.
Welcome to the next budget planning workshop for Delaware Academy, and we'll start the meeting with the pledge of allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Mr. Schultz, the floor is yours.
What I've done is I took the budget that this presentation we worked on and just kind of added to it. I will say that I don't have a lot to add to it. It's been a quiet week regarding budget. We've done some work as far as with teachers and administrators, just looking at some of the requests. I will say that we have a balanced budget currently right now as we speak, with minimal impact to taxpayers and growth on that. But we've also, I was surprised to not hear much coming from the state. We talked at the board meeting last Monday. I alluded to the fact that we have a number. That number has been the same number for about 2 weeks now, and I have received nothing from the state. I have only received one number from Senator Schumer, and that was $1.75 million that they are estimating for the district to receive in this most recent stimulus package. Sounds like a lot of money. I would say it is a lot of money. I will also say that it's also there to hopefully help in the next 3 years with the budget problems that New York State will continue to have. So,
What was the amount you said?
what's up?
What was the amount you just said?
1.75 million.
In addition.
In addition, that actually would be a grant. Basically, the way that they've done the ESSER and the GEARS is a grant. I mean, it's not like you apply and you turn down, I will say that. You just have to go through a process to apply for it. That's all we received. We have not received any language regarding how to implement it, how long it will be there, but we'll talk about it here in a second. And I'll go over kind of what I think and what Kelly and I have talked about multiple times the last couple of weeks, what we estimate is gonna happen. Listening to other business officials and kind of the vibe from the state, we put together a little plan, so. I'm not gonna start from the very beginning, we've gone through this quite a bit. So we talked last 2 weeks ago regarding the stimulus package. Basically $122 billion for K through 12 schools nationwide. We had talked, there was about an additional, they were looking about 15 billion. They wanted 15 billion for the districts here in New York State. They got about 12. There has, like I talked a couple times too, there's been some recent uptick in tax revenue, more than they originally estimated, close to, and Perry alluded to it on Monday of last week too, about 1.8, 1.9 billion more. So they got a little bit more to spend with, and on the education at least.
Terry, what restrictions would there be on that, its use?
So that's kind of what we don't know.
I didn't hear the question. What was that?
Restrictions on how it's used.
Yeah, are there any preliminary conversations about, I know that they talked about an extended timeline.
They've talked about an extended timeline, they also have not determined how it will be allocated. The most of the talk is, as Eric mentioned, similar to a grant, where that money is held in abeyance, and then you fill out your FS 10 every year and those components. But I believe that you also need to demonstrate the district's plan for how it will be allocated. And again, it's not a one-time shot. We have over the course of the next 3 years to determine where that's allocated. And that's the piece that we discussed a bit. No details beyond that though. So anxiously awaiting.
Yeah, and this is kind of one of those situations where luckily and unluckily, we've been through a situation in the past with GEA and the recession where we had stimulus money that came in from the federal government back around 2009, 2010. It was called Jobs Restoration. It was also called ERA funding. That was a little different in the fact that you had to, that was a grant also, but you had to move, that was considered federal money, so you had to move salaries out of general fund and move them into federal. So you saw these budgets dip. Everyone thought they were making huge cuts, but their federal budgets increased the same amount. So what we've heard, I have heard from multiple sources right now, is they're not gonna go at in that manner. It's gonna be general fund money. So, and the thing that was different this year was the first round of stimulus, which is called GEERS, GEERS, and ESSER funding, was a grant application like you would Title I or 611 or 619, but they didn't make you take and reallocate any of the salaries or equipment or contractual costs off into another fund. They let you keep it in general. That is the talk right now, that it would stay in general. So what we did was that funding was a 2-year funding, and we were able to say, listen, in this year we're gonna spend this amount, and next year we're gonna spend this amount. I would assume that they're gonna do something very similar. In the GEERS and ESSER funding that came from the federal government just back in the fall, there were no restrictions. There wasn't, you have to do this, you have to implement it for that. If you decided for salaries, you were fine, equipment, so there was no restrictions on that at all. So, what we have heard is that it would be a 3-year funding stream. And then we would just lay out our plan and then go forward from there. So one of the things that we talked a lot about was current reserves. Unfortunate too, we've also been through a time with GEA. So we struggled a lot to try to figure out, okay, how do you, without any information from the state of New York, without anything additional from the federal government just saying, here's your money, we're trying to speculate, trying to assume how we can spend it and what to do with it. That's not a one-time 1.75, let's go buy a ton of stuff. I am under the assumption that most likely what will happen is the state will end up making, so the federal stimulus money comes in this year, good for 3 years, there will be no more. They're done. Now the state will continue to cut, just exactly what happened back in the recession.
They'll put it in one side and take it out the other.
Now they're being told that they can't do that. Both sides are actually saying you don't try to play one, take one away and put another one in. I don't know if that's gonna be true though. I mean, it's gonna be very hard for the state of New York not to be able to
They
not
keep
cut
calling
it.
it supplemental funds,
Yeah.
which leads you to believe that they can't do that.
Supplementing a reduced budget.
Exactly. Yeah, they'll change the formulas, the 8 formulas, or they'll reduce it in some manner. They have to. I don't know how they're gonna make up that money. It has to come from somewhere, and I don't see it coming from the medical field. It's gonna come most likely from education, so. So like I talked in previous meetings, we have funded reserves for quite a few years. We have a very healthy, financial reserve system here at the district. So one of the things we talked about is a reserve is for a rainy day. It's for those situations pretty much like where we're heading towards now. So if the state starts to cut, we have additional funding also. We can start maybe using a little bit of both. And that's kind of what Kelly and I talked about, is a plan to at least lay out some kind of safety net. So what I decided to do is we decided to kind of look at a 3-year plan based upon reserves. So one of the things that we looked at was looking at GEA back in 2009, 2010. It was interesting because you saw in the first year, 2009, 2010, you saw probably about a $1.4 million decrease in funding to the district. There was jobs restoration money in there. Ended up netting out to be about $400,000 cut to the budget that first year. From there, it averaged about $800,000 a year, $840,000. So I put together, like I said, again, making an assumption, trying to look at what has happened in the past, how do we kind of fix that? Possible aid cuts could be close to $850,000. There's no doubt. I mean, it seems like it's impossible to function after that when you cut, $850,000 out of a $20 million budget. District has, and so everyone else did at the same time. There were a lot of cuts, there were a lot of holdbacks, a lot of creativity. I don't think we have a lot of that creativity left. You can only cut so far. Most districts cut about 20% of their staffing and never really replenished to the full amount. But there was also declining enrollment at that time, so it kind of went together. So we estimated about $850,000 in aid cuts each year, all the way through 2025, which accounts to about a little over $2.5 million. Our average budget growth year to year is about $300,000. By the time you have any retirements or any, but you have at least $300,000 probably just in contractual. And that's, of course, I'm taking this and saying that there's no budget growth, there's no additional aid, and we're not trying to push the needle too much by creating new programs. This is just basically a status quo, trying to survive. But you got a budget growth of about 800 or 300,000 each year. So what I'm looking at doing is trying to cover that gap using about $560,000 in reserve funding each year, along with a third of the rescue aid, which is the new stimulus. So, again, not a perfect scenario, you don't want to keep dipping into reserves, but if we had to, as far as survival and keeping everything status quo, staffing the same, programs the same, this is a possibility, and it's very easy to do in the fact that we are financially healthy.
That's not.
So basically, this is just to illustrate and to introduce you to the thinking that we have to be working on many assumptions, but we have to be looking at it from a long-term perspective. And it's not as simple as we've got 1.7 million coming in, so that means we can go out at 0% to the taxpayer. This is also not money that's going to stay with us, right? You've all heard that kind of that fiscal cliff. And so we have to be real thoughtful about this. So these estimates are only that at this point. The rough estimates based on, informed by history. Informed by history of this district and also history of the state of New York in terms of education funding. But it just illustrates real quick how quickly that gets absorbed based on these preliminary assumptions. So it's really to illustrate the thinking more than anything else.
When the gap elimination adjustment first happened, how was the district's number calculated? That was the GEA.
How was that calculated? I'd have to look again, it's been so long, I don't know exactly how it was. I think it was just a straight cut. I think what they did was they took foundation aid and just slashed it. And then that was the number they used.
Because foundation aid already assumes your combined wealth ratio.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I mean, if we sort of looked at what could be sustainable for schools around, if they do it proportionally, we'd be okay, because most schools wouldn't be able to take much more than that, if that.
Right.
If they look at it like, well, this school A is doing this well with these reserves, then we're in trouble if that happens.
There was never.
I'm
It's not
for
fair.
that at all.
No, there was never, it was basically a straight calculation, everyone got this taken out based upon either the combined wealth ratio. It was embedded in the foundation, it was never pulled out of there, it was never looked at and said, oh, you should be able to survive this, we're gonna give you less.
We'll do better if that doesn't happen.
No,
That's right.
no, not at all. I hope they don't go that route either. So, but I mean, it will happen, there's no doubt, I don't see how they're gonna build budgets and continue to add foundation aid or continue to add to those formula-based aid packages in the current state that they're in. So exactly, this is just a snapshot, this would change probably 4 different times by the time, maybe tomorrow, I don't really know, but this is kind of the forward thinking in the plan. For those that are first putting together a budget for a school, I will say you're in a great situation. I've been in situations where there's 12 pink slips in here and we're waiting to see what the aid numbers are gonna be. So we're in a situation with our budget where we're not making cuts, but we're forward thinking and trying to figure out, okay, how do we take this money and keep everything sustained? And I don't look at this as a financial crisis of like, even if this all transpired and really did happen, we had to cut into almost $1.7 million in reserve, we still have reserves at the end. Basically, I just did a quick snapshot. This is where we were 15, 16. If everything transpired exactly what you just saw before, this is the growth that we've had throughout the years. We're gonna be definitely lower than 15, 16, but again, your program is gonna be still sustained here. Just as an idea, total general fund reserves, along with debt service, equal probably by the end of this year about 10.2 million. They start to decline and we'll start taking reserve money out of them to balance budgets. You see a huge dip right here around 22, 23, but that's debt service. That's all project money that's being taken out to subsidize and to offset the tax share or the taxpayer share. So So again, by the time you end up with long-term debt service and your general fund reserves, you're almost at 5 million all the way up into 2025. And that's again, taking in, there's no growth in the budget, there's no savings each year. That's taking a flat budget, spending it, and nothing left. That has never happened here. We usually end up having some kind of savings. You know, we're projecting out fuel costs, we're projecting out other items throughout the year. They come in lower, some come in higher, but each year there's some savings. Like I said, we talked about it the last meeting in 2019.
That was the bar.
Yeah, you know, we're anywhere from 95 to 97% we spend on our budget. But this is worst case scenario. I like to kind of play that first, and then hopefully as things transpire and get better, it's even better for us. Proposed budget today, we talked about this last meeting also, just contractual salaries, benefits of, health benefits have been fine. It's really TRS and ERS are going up a very small amount. The market's been good, which is also the plus. We talked about that and the fact that, you know, in the past with the recession, the market tanked. The state didn't have any money. It was really a perfect storm. There was just an article this weekend that, you know, bonuses on Wall Street are still really high this year. So the market has continued to be stable. Energy costs, not too much. Not a big increase, very small in heating fuel. This is the budget currently, as of today. Got about 1.9, we're a little under 2% growth, 1.96. There's higher growth in here. There's a little bit of debt service for the new ban that's gonna be coming due at the end of the summer, and we renew it again. Other than that, keeping it under 2% and a 1.5% tax increase. We have a very small amount of retirements this year. We only know of one at this time. So that's a little different with this budget. Usually you have, you know, a couple, 2, 3 at this point. We only have one. I don't know if we'll see any more.
Deadline. I mean, arbitrary deadline, but.
Janine, do you know the contract deadline for announcing retirement? I don't.
There's a deadline, if I'm not mistaken, at the end of March. And that deadline is only not the fact that recognizes to be paid for the retirement package for unused sick leave into the next budget year. The district has the right to hold it for a full year.
That's.
I was just curious if the,
Honestly, March 1st.
if the state does offer incentives, do you
March
think
1st,
the district would Delaware County?
Jump into it?
Yeah.
We haven't really discussed it. So just so you know, the state has 2 retirement incentives out there that they're kicking around, and I think they're gonna try to have it passed. It's within the bill. 2 of them, one is a 55-25, of course, it's always 55 years of age, 30 years of service. They got a 55-25 out there right now for those 55 years of age. You can retire with 25 years of service with no penalty. There's a 55-10 out there also, which I'm trying to figure that one out. Really, the 2 of those were basically put out there to help in situations where districts are going to be cutting positions. And, you know, if it's one of those situations and the district is going to cut positions, it's trying to make it a little softer on the employee. The issue with that is those aren't free. The district has to buy, each district has to kind of buy into it or offer it. And when you buy into it, I haven't seen the number yet, but when they were talking about it in the spring, it was like a 1/4 percentage point on top of your salaries for it was 12 years. So I think it's in a situation where I think it's really more beneficial for districts who are gonna be doing layoffs and not rehiring. Because then again, if you start doing that, then you're just eating into your breakage. So we have not discussed that, and I'm sure we will. I have been trying to find the most recent charge to the district that would entail. But it's not just something free. The 5 years of no penalty, of course, someone has to make that up, and it's not gonna be the state. We went through the budget over the weekend again and just kind of looked at some areas. We finalized all the teacher requests, we finalized a lot of the special education numbers. So basically this budget is ready to go. As far as right now, I mean, we can talk about it in more detail. The only thing we see is if the state does come through with more funding, then we can kind of pivot and change and switch and look at a few other things. I know we talked about some summer remedial programs. They are not in here. We do have Additional PD for the elementary letters training, that is stage 2 of that. We did the first stage not last summer, but the summer before. That's included in this budget. But everything else is included. So nothing contractual was really taken out, nothing big that changed. As far as staffing numbers, stay exactly the same too. Going forward, we're gonna continue to look at a few expenses. Like I said, we probably are about 95-98% done with that. I don't see many changes. The big changes would be any kind of revenue streams that come through. Now, they're supposed to adopt a budget this week. That's usually their goal. I haven't heard any chatter, nothing last week, nothing as of today. We still want to figure out the status of the recent stimulus package. Like I said, I've only seen that number once. Questar 3, which is the financial services planning for districts, has not come out with anything. ASBO has not come out with anything. The Association of School Business Officials, Superintendent's Organization has come out with nothing also. So once we find that out, we'll update the board. Some are remedial programs and what can we facilitate. Even if we are to plan something, we also have a pretty good sized building project going on here this summer. If we were to have any space whatsoever for that, it would have to be most likely in the middle school. We have 7 bathrooms being done in here along with electrical panels and everything else. I think it'd be very difficult to sustain something in the high school area. Middle school would be much easier. Elementary would be very difficult. New windows, UV replacements would be pretty tight. We'll know more this week as far as the final state budget, what that looks like. And the one thing that we have a budget almost approved by this point, usually would have been the last board meeting, which would have been last week. We're gonna push it to the 12th. We will have to have a quick meeting to approve it, but I think that gives us a little time to see exactly what the stimulus package entails and also to see if there's anything additional with the state budget. But that gives Sue plenty of time for absentee ballots, for all the protocols she has to follow for advertising. So after break, we'll come back and reconvene and look at it that way. Any questions?
Carrie, is this number, this is going back to when we have the drive red program, is that right?
That's only a summer program. There's not a full FTE for driver's ed, not in that budget.
When did we make that decision?
It was something we discussed, as a board, we didn't make it, but it was something that we had discussed, that I discussed internally here.
Yeah, I think in terms of, if we're gonna do a program change, we should be all on the same page.
No, you're right, yeah.
I think we talked about that anytime we would have a program change, we would. So I don't know what the approach is, I know it's changed just because of COVID.
Mhm.
But I don't know what it's changed back to that we can have or can't have.
Okay.
So I don't know if we're talking about driver ed. I know there's been a different approach, we discussed that a little bit at finance, some can be done, parents can do some of the hours. But that's why I was wondering what we have in here for that and what we want to plan for.
So that was not intended to be a long-term solution, from what I understand, the spirit of that. From an overall master schedule programming perspective, we had talked about offering that in the summer to our students, still at district cost. And because it's become more challenging based on the changes to graduation requirements, the changes to master schedule, priorities within the master schedule, that I believe Robin's recommendation last year, and I tend to agree, that it does not make sense to have that as a bona fide standalone class within somebody's master schedule during the school day, paying a full-time FTE to be teaching that solely, based on historical enrollment and what that does within the master schedule. What I understand, there are no other districts that offer that as a standalone class anymore. What most districts are currently doing is offering that either through BOCES or in the summer, and then having families assume the cost. I would recommend that we continue to offer that in the summer at district cost for our students, but not as part of the overall master schedule.
That would still be a school district employee, or it would be farmed out to like a company?
I would not recommend farming it out to a company, I would love to keep that internal. If we wanted to be aided on it to a certain degree, we could run it through BOCES, but they allow us to hire our own people. And they technically become kind of that BOCES employee for that summer, and that enables the district to recuperate the aid on it. But they've said, you choose your own person, and I know we have a couple people right here in district who have the ability to do that.
Would it, from a capacity standpoint, how much, and can we accommodate that in the summer schedule, what capacity we would need?
I don't know definitively how many kids we're looking at this year, but just preliminary conversations did not lead me to believe that we could not. I know BOCES has no limit on that. Our vans are readily available. I don't see what barriers would present to that necessarily. I mean, we certainly would have classroom space.
What percentage of the driver ed salary is paid by the Kellogg monies?
There's not anything that's, I know that in the past, there was something that basically said, okay, the Kellogg could use so much for driver's ed. There's actually basically the way it works is an allocation, and we just allocated it towards driver's ed. I think it was full funding, but you have to, the issue with that is, if you wanted to take more additional funding from Kellogg in this budget, you're gonna have to be very careful because it's only based upon interest earned. So if you had a bad year as far as interest earned off of that, you could run the risk of not funding it, or not having the funding and then trying to find the funding somewhere else. In the past, the district would allocate and write in that it was for driver's ed. With the driver's ed kind of being taken out the last year, the money is still there, it's just being allocated as a revenue.
Wasn't it though that I think Kellogg supplemental states that we have to use that for something.
It does not say anything in particular, it says services that the district either, I don't know the exact wording, but there's one, I think it's one of the funds talks about anything above and beyond what the district would normally not budget for. And then there's
So that means
capital
that if we don't
improvements.
use it for that, we've got to use it for something we normally wouldn't budget for.
That's the language in it, yeah.
So what, if it's not driver ed, what are we proposing? That's something we've always talked about as a board, so.
Well, it doesn't just
Still do
list
that.
one particular thing, that is within a sentence of like 4 other items. Capital improvement, it talks about student activities, things like that, so. If you want, we could pull out items to say that money is being allocated. It's basically a revenue stream alongside the budget, that's what it is. We've always we pinpointed and pulled that out, I didn't do it with this budget, but we can do that.
And at what point did the driver ed teacher only teach driver ed? Because in the past, they were always driver ed and health or driver ed and
Part-time.
PE. How long ago?
They were always full-time driver ed since I've been here. Now, the person that was here before me had left, I think, right before I came on. But the person that we had was a full FTE as a driver's ed, nothing else.
Although last year, I believe that Tammy knows the individual. He was teaching a 0.2, in the phys ed department. Is that right?
Yep.
So there was a little bit of allocation in phys ed and health, but I don't believe he was teaching health class, I think it was just phys ed.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, so Carrie, if we could look at what we would allocate that to above and beyond normal budget, I think it's important. Every year we always talked about what that was because it was my understanding it had to be something improved because Kellogg is separate. Right, is that what you were using?
Yeah, that's my recollection.
Oh, with a summer enrichment program.
Yeah, something right to
Because
that.
that's not budgeted and
And it depends on which Kellogg fund you're talking about.
this is
because
supplemental.
they each have their, yeah.
This might be too much to ask for you, Gary, or Kelly, but, see if there's anyone that can tell us what kind of capacity we could have for someone driver, like how many kids would we
For
have?
driver's ed?
Yeah,
Yeah, interest survey or something
Yeah, I
like
know we
that.
have
Look
that.
at that.
cause I know this was a long time ago, when 25 to 30 years, whenever I took it, there were 20 kids,
Mhm.
20 or 30 kids that could do it. 'Cause
I think that the number was at least that or more during the summer. And I know that they were operating every day, they were
Yeah, you
operating
do it every
morning,
day, or 4
afternoon,
days a week.
flip-flopping, so I think it was I was thinking the number was well into like 30 to 40.
Yeah.
So,
And I think there's flexibility there too, that you wouldn't have to go by the regular school day if you were to start at
Oh, we started at 7 o'clock.
Yeah, we did 2 in the summer.
if you're done.
I was here at 7.
If kids had jobs that maybe would conflict with
Yeah.
it, there were
Sure.
scheduling.
We can find that out. I can look at what we did in the summer last time, and what we done a regular school year.
So in the summer, would they still get school credit? Would it still be a credited class in the summer?
Not accredited class, they just get their hours
So they'll
for,
get credit.
No, the state is frowning on that, actually.
yeah.
So they just take the class because they need the class, but it doesn't count as
School
It
credit.
does not count as school credit, but they take the class, they get the reduction, the family gets the
Right.
reduction on the
Right,
insurance,
right.
right? And it meets all the requirements so that they can sit for their driver's license. And it's free of charge to the families.
And if it was during the school year, it counts as credit, like as a.
It used to.
Uh-huh.
The state is beginning to frown on that practice, specifically for driver's ed. You're hard pressed to find that listed anymore in courses that are state approved and.
So is that another reason why you're trying to get it on the schedule, because it's not a class for the kids to actually get credit?
That's, if I can read the tea leaves down the road, I think that's the direction that
Sounds
will eventually not be able to do that anymore.
Right, so then they're just
Um,
losing time.
But it's more to open up room in student schedules for other more relevant coursework that allows graduation pathways.
Anything else?
But we can find out, we'll
Oh,
get
yeah,
that
that's
information
easy.
back to you, we can have more discussion about it.
That'd be great, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Any other questions regarding the budget? Was that, did you talk with, discussion?
I did, yeah. So the other piece is, Karen had passed out to the elementary drain repair options sheet. And I'll provide just a brief introduction to this, and I'll let Carrie dig into the details. As we mentioned previously, as they opened up the flooring over at the elementary, and at the same time had 2 bathrooms go down in 2 of the classrooms. We quickly determined that there was a main pipe that goes down that hallway that had a bow in it that was preventing adequate drainage. It's a problem that was pre-existing. A few times a year, we're snaking the drains over there and trying to get those bathrooms back online. So now that they're in there, they have pinpointed the problem, and we asked them to provide some estimates for us based on what that repair would cost, since we're already in under that flooring capital project. And there are also implications based on the pitch of some of those pipes that tie into the work that's currently being done in that elementary cafeteria area. And so we asked them to come up with some estimates that were very minimal, that involved just cutting out partial part of the floor, replacing that bowed piece, and then resetting the pitch into the bathroom. We looked at a larger space, because keep in mind that's all the terrazzo floor down the entire hallway. And what we wanted to avoid was a bunch of mismatched terrazzo or terrazzo and tile and that kind of thing. So we had asked for estimates from one joint down the rest of the hallway, so we would have a better chance aesthetically at looking at that. And so they've come back with a number of different options, and the price tag on all of them was more than what we had anticipated. And this is where I'll let Carrie get into it. However, what that we need to accomplish tonight. The question was, can we even have this as an action item on tonight's agenda, because it did not previously exist on the agenda. So that was a call from Bruce McKeegan, who clarified that in the public notice can absolutely say for purposes of budget workshop. And as long as the public notice did not handcuff us beyond that. So in the public notice that went out, the question is, did it say, and no other items will be discussed? It didn't say that, it said for purposes of budget workshop. So he said that is minimally compliant, and so you can have this discussion and the board can direct Carrie and I to move in one particular direction. If the board is comfortable with that. If you would rather schedule a special meeting and have the specifics of this on public notice, that is up to you as well. But minimally compliant, we can move forward. So we can certainly have a discussion tonight. You don't have to take action or direct us, or we can, reschedule altogether. That's really up to the pleasure of the board.
Okay, so can I just get some clarification on the 2 bullets at the bottom?
Yes.
So the company, when it says it's recommended to do the basic repair, does that mean the third option on here?
Yes.
Okay, and then the other question I have is, so the numbers that are in here, is this, will Chase the company versus what the plumber was gonna charge?
No, I'll go
This is
through
what
that.
they're charging.
Yeah, I'll go through it real quick, and
sorry.
David,
So
David can give an explanation also about I'll let you talk real quick about what we're talking, basically it's a dip in the pipe.
So can we pause real quick?
Yeah.
And I'd just like to seek clarification from the board as to if you want to have this discussion right now.
As the president of the board, I would like to have this discussion right now and make the decision right now. Does anyone object to that?
Do we have the money in the present
Well,
building?
first we have to answer that question. Does anyone object to just having the discussion right now, making a decision tonight?
Let's do it.
No one objects. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, great. Carrie will answer that question.
We'll start with the basics,
Yeah,
so.
start from the beginning now, go to the end, and then we'll decide.
Yeah.
There you go.
David, I'll let you kind of start this off, if you want,
Thank you.
please.
Okay, what's going on right now is, if you can look at the picture there kind of, the main pipe runs down the hallway. They ripped out the kitchen. Where the pipe runs down the hallway, there is a pitch in the opposite direction in the kitchen. It should be tilted down into the pipe, it's not, it's this way. So if we try to fix, originally they said we could just fix what's going from the kitchen in. But if they fix that, our other problem is the 2 bathrooms that are up there
Right
further.
over here.
There is the one bathroom starts at 1'11". At the wall between the bathroom, it goes up to 1'8". Then it goes back down to 1'11". So there's a big dip there. As it comes out into the hallway, it goes back down to 1'11", goes up to 1'9", up to 1'8", and then back down to 2'1". So there's quite a drop in there. But if they don't fix both of them at the same time, even if they fix the kitchen, when they go to fix the one for the bathroom, it may not line back up, so we may have a pitch in the opposite direction again, which in turn, they would have to rip the kitchen floor back out. So, we don't wanna do that.
No.
So that's what the pitch is doing right now.
This is the hall, where the orange is, that's the hallway, and that's the pipe they're looking to replace. This right here, you have basically a pipe coming in here and another pipe coming in here. This is the serving area of the kitchen, which is all right now.
Am I right in thinking that we did not know about the kitchen problem? But with what Superintendent Zimmerman said, we did know that there were some bathroom problems that had to be periodically snaked.
Yes, because the
Like
students.
once a month, once every couple
Every
months.
year?
Yes.
And yet, nobody thought about putting that in the building project, those bathrooms?
Until we got this far into the project, we didn't understand the the depth of the problem, of the etiology, what was causing that. So there could have been an assumption that the kids stuffed too much toilet paper, you know, or whatever it came from, but yes, no, you're right, that was pre-existing.
So basically they came back, so we had talked about multiple options. One, not doing anything. That's option 4, and it's not there. It's not even on there. So option 4 is to do nothing. We did talk about that. We talked about it and said, well, okay, so we have to, snake a toilet once every 2 months. Is that gonna be such a problem? But coming back and really looking at it, even though Chase is recommending we do it just for that simple fact. If we end up with an issue, first of all, try to line everything up later. But also, I'd rather not get the kitchen floor down and all the equipment only to have to rip it out in a year or 2 later if we knew that problem existed. So we ended up getting the first set of quotes, and that was basically ripping out on this side, almost this entire section of terrazzo on the floor. And terrazzo is not cheap. I'm gonna tell you it's anywhere from, it's $25 a square foot. So it's probably $10,000, $15,000 depending on that section. When we got that quote between the general contractor, so you got 2 things. General contractor is gonna be the one that goes in and cuts the floor out, takes care of the subsurface underneath, tamps it all down. Plumber comes in, puts the pipe in, they would then regrade and fill all back in. Am I missing anything? Nope. Then the flooring guy comes in. So those are the 2 main contractors. They came in with a quote, I think it was $65,000 alone for the GC. I mean, it was almost $91,000. So to answer your question, do we have the money in the budget? We do. You have 10%, about 10% allowance, and it's called contingency. So there's roughly about $800,000 sitting within the project for the, oh my goodness, I didn't know that existed problem. Our fear is this, to spend 10% of that contingency a month into the project is probably not a good thing. And especially, it's not even an area that we were gonna work on. I mean, if we found it here, it's a little different, but this is a much different issue. So when we talked to them, we went to LaChase and said, both LaChase and Highland, Kelly and I did on, I think it was Wednesday, and said, I need your opinion on this. You work for us, basically, we need to know exactly how you feel about it. We don't feel comfortable about it, how do you feel? And they came back with the same recommendation. I wouldn't sit there and spend $91,000 right now without knowing and doing any work throughout the rest of the building. So yes, it is there. Do we feel comfortable spending all of it? No, we don't. So we went back and forth, we talked about, okay, instead of the whole floor coming out and new terrazzo coming in, is there a way of just doing a smaller section? So that's where you see options 2. Now, option 2, you're looking at ripping the floor out, but only a 2-foot section, just enough where this pipe is, and then filling it in with terrazzo, which isn't gonna match. And then there's option 3, ripping this floor out where the pipe is, replacing the pipe, getting everything aligned correctly, and then filling the floor in with some kind of alternate flooring, level it off, and worry about the terrazzo later. That's option 3. And as far as the estimates go, you're gonna see a range for the plumber. And you'll probably agree, they got 240 hours in it. The original estimate is almost $26,000. $2,000 is for supplies, the pipe, and a few fixtures, and the rest is labor. Both LaChase and Highland do not think they need that many hours. So we're thinking it's much less than that, so that's why you see a range. We don't have it, so they gave us a quote at 24.8, we're actually asking 25.8. We're saying, hey, we're not gonna take that quote, we will let you work on time and materials only. So they basically have to fill out a timesheet of when they're there, because it's gonna take them 3 days to cut the floor and get it all tamped down, ready to go. There's no need to have a plumber standing there waiting while they're doing that.
No.
So we're suggesting then that get everything done and figure out what the hours are up until the point where the flooring is ready, then come back and decide on what the flooring
Yeah,
should be.
exactly. We'll level it off and we can do some, they've got some ideas of unique areas, but the flooring could be, hey, listen, we put something down that's very temporary for right now, whether it be polished concrete or something right in that area, it's not gonna look great, but we can turn around, if we get into the summer and we say, hey, listen, this project has gone really well, and we have all this contingency left, we're gonna go back and finish that floor, we have the opportunity to do that.
So you're saying that the polished concrete is gonna be for like a few months?
Temporary.
Yeah, well, you can do it for a couple of years if you wanted, it's just easier to take that out than it would be to fill it with terrazzo, only to take the terrazzo back out, so.
And there is, the cafeteria floor is terrazzo as part of the project, so there's
There's
a
gonna
good
be
chance that
remnants.
it can be addressed at
It
that
just
time.
likely won't match.
It won't,
So
well,
it's really what, what is your appetite for things matching perfectly or not?
it's eventually,
Well, when it says terrazzo flooring blended, I interpreted it differently. It wasn't terrazzo that they were putting in, but whatever they put in, they were kind of blending it in, kind of like a
No,
bag for a person.
Terrazzo,
It's blended,
No, it's the terrazzo, just.
it is.
They're just not gonna be able to match
It's a
it.
little different because it's a different age.
You got it.
But even though terrazzo is expensive, what we have has been there many years. And what I've heard in the past from Mr. Bartlett was it's easy to take care of.
Yeah.
And it's durable, and it looks good.
And ultimate, well,
What?
go ahead,
No, I just thinking,
go ahead.
yeah, that if it looks good, it will last, it's easy to, it will help the janitorial staff. Whereas if you get something that is alternative flooring chosen,
Lucy, I look at the alternate as a temporary fix. I mean, I think that it's gonna look, as far as matching goes, I mean, if you look down that hallway, I never noticed before that, a lot of it doesn't match anyways, because it's two different construction times, so the shades are different in the terrazzo itself. I personally look at that alternate as get the pipe fixed, get the flooring kind of temporary, and then move from there, and then do something much bigger down the road.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm looking.
In the first bid, or in the bid, there is another bathroom going up there, right?
No, there's two that are just stationary right there, I don't know of anything, the only thing I know that they're knocking out, there's a sink area.
You mean in the cafeteria itself?
No, well, I know there's one in the cafeteria, but one of those rooms is getting split.
I don't think they're adding another bathroom, no, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
No, they're splitting it in a way that both sides can access that bathroom.
Okay.
oh,
Does everyone know like where we're talking about? And-
Kindergarten.
And so I just wanna share a couple of things. I looked at it physically and I was at the meeting with the Chase representative. There's a good portion of the terrazzo in that location is not in good shape. There's some big cracks already and some discoloration. So it's sooner or later we come up in a project to be redone anyway. Just wanted to mention that. I strongly advocate for spending the money and fixing the flooring. We absolutely, it would be silly not to. So, I don't think there's any reason to go with option one of taking out the entire floor at this point. For the reasons mentioned, it doesn't make sense.
So that, the only reason for number one would be so the flooring,
All matches.
would be uniform.
which it doesn't need.
They still think they can do this over Easter break.
Yes.
If we,
They would try to do that, yep, yeah, they would need this week and next week.
the wastewater pipes that are there are cast. And the proposals will be replaced with PVC.
Okay.
Just want to mention that, I wasn't talking about, it's appropriate and it's, and I just, from having being there and talking about it, advocate for option three at this point.
I will note also that we had a company come in 2 days actually to actually video the entire line all the way down to the end of the hallway along these bathrooms. And, I mean, except for this spot right here, the rest of the line is fine. And it's clean. So we've done enough work to look at the rest of it and say, all right, is there more to this problem than what you see? No, it's right here.
Okay. And I also want to advocate for the pressuring the common materials and for the plumber, I can't imagine someone in a couple days where,
Yeah,
for the plumber.
That's a.
$240.
I don't honestly think it's.
One line, two toilets,
That's my honest opinion.
It just blew.
two lines out of the kitchen,
Sometimes take them a month.
The lines on the kitchen should be crowded.
they're already,
Yeah,
Kitchen crowded.
they're right there, exactly, so they're already connected.
it's really not much.
Mr. Schultz, who will be choosing the alternate flooring if we choose option 3? And what,
Well, I think what that means, at least my understanding was that they'll put the temporary polished concrete in that area for now. And then as we get further into the project and we see what we have left in allowances, coinciding with when they're pouring the terrazzo in the kitchen, we would take that terrazzo material to then pull off that temporary concrete and replace it there. They can't guarantee it will be the same color lot. It will be close, but they can't guarantee it's the same. So the option 3 is not a long-term permanent solution. My question to option 3, Carrie, I don't know if you caught this or not, I haven't, is that once they go in to pull up the polished concrete and replace it, there's an additional charge at that time for that,
There would be a small charge, yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
and I'm wondering what that would be, because if this option 3, the high-end range, is above the low-end range on option 2, which includes the terrazzo.
I can't, I don't know.
I'm not sure if, yeah. if
Why
there's-
not?
I mean, my question with the terrazzo, doing a 2-foot by 33-foot section, how is that gonna look to try to match that?
Yeah.
My feeling would be probably if you're gonna do terrazzo and have it come out, you want a larger section done to try to blend that. The small section just running, it'd be like putting a new carpet right in here, this section here, it would
Right.
show. So,
in your opinion, Mr. Sisio, is polished concrete more slippery than terrazzo?
When it's wet, no. It's about the
So
same.
it's about the same?
Would the concrete be a base for what could go in as terrazzo though? I mean,
It could be,
because if you just had them say, we need a subfloor anyway, right?
right.
Just have a line down.
So just have it be prepped for whatever decision we make later on based on the type of materials. Right?
They're gonna pour a slab,
Yeah,
and then they're gonna do another pour of concrete to polish on top of that hardened surface.
Yeah.
So that when they remove it, it's almost like chipping off tile or something.
so that would just come out and remove that.
Okay,
That makes
Exactly, that's exactly how they describe it.
Probably
Right.
definitely less than an inch, probably like 5/8 of an inch or something like that.
That'd be,
So there's.
And that's where the terrazzo would go back
that'd be
in.
roughly how they.
The other question is there, would this, because it's not connected to the scope of this project, is it warrant an emergency project?
I asked that question, a lot of times when we talk about an emergency project, it's, a roof falling in or a wall caving in. This is not an emergency in the fact that there's student health being involved or anything like that, so.
Even with bathrooms that aren't functional?
But they are functioning. So the bathrooms are functioning, they've been functioning, and then once a month we have to kind of do a little work because there's some standing water, because they are pitched also. And so I can check with SED, I've talked to Highland, I've talked to Chase, they both don't feel it, I don't feel it either. We can talk to the state ed, we can talk to state ed about it, but
Just a question,
Yeah, that
Don't know.
and there are 2 bathrooms that are in classrooms, so, and there are alternate bathrooms on that hallway that students can use. So that would not be construed as a, public health
Emergency.
threat,
So
just for that reason alone.
how many feet did they determine they're gonna cut?
was it 32? 33
I
something?
think it was 32, I think is what it was, 32.
Oh, except for option 1?
No, they're all the same, the pipe that has to be
Oh, the
replaced is
pipe is
32.
But they're not gonna try to go into the bathroom, so they're just gonna try to pick up.
Yeah.
Correct.
So normally we wouldn't talk about this in a budget meeting, but we have been talking with them last week about it, last couple of weeks, they finally got quotes, we finally got to analyze them on Friday. And we don't want this to slow down, once they get this in, then they can start working through the kitchen, we didn't want it to slow down progress. So, So that's why we brought it tonight.
I think the time and materials approach is the best way at this point, and then stop short of the, the final solution, just because we don't know, and we can see where they come out, the time and materials, it may be 30,000, 20,000. Change orders are where they make their money, so they're hoping that we jump to option one.
Is there such a thing as leftover for auto?
No, they pour it.
Okay.
I've always wanted to see them do it, I've never seen it,
Yeah,
but
it sounds
I had one too.
yeah, it's like, yeah. But yeah, it's poured, they do right on, my understanding is they bring a crew right on site, and pour it right there, and then they sand and grind it down.
Yeah, they grind it with a big grinder, that just smooths it right out.
The other thing to point out too, though, if you go up and down this hall, this has been matched and patched several times, and it generally looks pretty good when they do that. They're pretty good at it. This has probably had multiple, if you look closely, there's places where the gold dividers don't even go all the way across, because they just kind of filled in a pothole or something,
Yeah.
it happens, when something gets old. So there may be that ability to match closely if you challenge them to do it.
And in 20 years, they'll match.
That's right.
I
Once
almost,
it's up clean, keep the floor right there.
Right.
it could be a situation too where they get involved and the GC overestimated, and the plumber overestimated, and now our numbers are even lower, and we say, we're over the travel right now, let's go for it.
Right.
Right.
It could be a situation, that way it's not an eyesore for the next year or something like that. We can definitely kind of gauge
Yeah, you have to promise.
or not.
You have to promise that you'll fix it.
I'm not even, I told Dave I can do this work, but it would take just the pipe, that's all I can do, but it'd take me 17 trips to Home Depot in maybe 3 days. So, not 240 hours.
It might take me 240.
Might not work after, but I get it. So,
So if we're in the position, say it's expenses come in lower than what we think, and they're doing the kitchen, we can do that at the same time?
yeah, I think, each week we've there's been obviously little things that, when you put together a project like this, you go, and then you scratch your head later and you're like, why are we doing this? And then you realize maybe the function's not there. So you're starting to see some things fall off, some things get added on. So as we now we're starting to pick up a little bit of speed. Now the abatement has started, as of as of today. Those things will keep you much more, now it's gonna happen a lot quicker. You can say, listen, we've saved $100,000 over here. We had to pick up 50,000 in change orders over here. If we had to fill in here, we probably could. So we can keep that monitored as we go along. The issue with doing it, the big option one, is they have to cut that whole floor out. We're not asking them to do that. So,
So once one's off the table, we decided something we can go back to.
So
Time
is,
and materials was for the GC too?
no, just the
Just the
plumber.
plumber,
Yes,
right?
yeah,
Okay, I just wanna make sure.
just the plumber.
so basically, option 3, if we go with that, after a time being, we're basically going to go to option 2, basically?
That's kind of how I feel. That's kind of what it feels like.
You're at a later time,
Right.
in a nutshell, at a later time, you're looking at finances and logistics at a later time and saying, listen, let's move and spend the extra money if we have to match out the floor, and then go from there, yes. Just right now, it's just get the pipe fixed so they can continue progress moving in the future.
There's a $10,000 difference at this point between 2 and 3. If we go 3, and then we have to remove the polished concrete, is there any idea of how much that would cost in the near
That's what I
future?
was asking, yeah.
That's a good question.
I don't know.
Because if it's gonna be over 10,000,
Then go with two.
I don't know.
I mean, that's just,
then
I
we
get what you're saying.
The only thing too, though, is that none of these really, if we go time and materials, none of these do apply, because this plumbing estimate is not gonna really end up being that.
What they said, so the plumbing estimate came in originally 25.8, they think it would be more along the lines of the 15, is what I that's why there's a range there, or less.
So if it were that,
10,000.
then option 2 would be 64 if we get
The low,
the low end.
yeah.
Which is what the high,
Which is what the high 3 is.
Right.
Now, they have tons of different options, and, you know, they threw out as far as flooring goes. They can put VCT tile down and level it off, they can put a piece of plywood down if we're trying to figure out if we wanna, you know, just for temporary, so that it's not a trip hazard. We don't have to go with the polished concrete, that was just something that they had brought up. So we have different options, we can do something, hey, listen, can you give us a month, just fill it in with something that's easily removable.
Safe.
And move, and then in a month, go, hey, listen, I think we're good.
That makes more sense to me, is to put down a piece of plywood, and a piece of carpeting over the top of it, so kids don't.
As long as it's safe for the children.
Right.
Right, so we can instruct them
I
to
mean,
do that.
if it's gonna look ugly, let it look ugly. Right,
So,
and Jane needs to clean it, of course, but.
what I'm hearing everybody say, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we do need to move forward with the repair.
Yes.
Yes,
And we're entering at option 3. We'll keep the board updated as to progress, and when we get to the point where we need to make that critical decision on terrazzo or not or other, we'll come back to the board, let you know a more accurate estimate of the time based on time and materials at that point, and then we can decide at that point, okay, let's move forward with the terrazzo or not, based on where costs stand at that time.
How long do they think this is gonna take? If they start this on next.
Tomorrow, they'll start tomorrow, they'll do it, they'll finish it over break.
So it'll be finished over break.
Mhm.
So we would have to have a floor decision by then.
No, I mean, within the time, you know, like I said, we could say,
plywood too.
just do something temporary until we figure it out, that's fine.
Yeah, no, I don't,
That's good, that's
fine. I'm sorry, I don't think we need polished concrete if a piece of plywood will do the same thing. This removal sounds like
Not if we're thinking about taking the polished
it'll
concrete.
force us
I think
to
he's already
fix it, actually. We can't leave it as polished concrete if it's a piece of plywood. It'll force us to make it look good.
Are you comfortable in consultation with the capital project committee when we determine what gets put in there temporarily of making that judgment call at that point?
Yes.
Because they may come back and say, no, we don't use plywood, and this is why, at all. They may say, you gotta go with a concrete or something a little more stable.
Well, they
What did
have,
they
they have
throw
to
out
think
there?
of the safety.
They threw out plywood,
Yeah, they
VCT
did.
tile,
Yeah,
they threw out
We talked about it.
ceramic tile, they threw out,
So they- plywood is on the.
It was on the
Yeah.
bill.
So plywood is on the
Yeah, let's do
table.
that.
Great, wonderful.
that's what I would do after I fix the pipe, which on the garage.
All right, so we'll keep everybody
Yeah.
posted on the
Yeah.
cost savings associated with the time and materials, and then decide from there.
It sounds like we're
Yep.
going with option 3 at the moment, everyone?
Yeah.
Or
Is
Is
I
everybody
agree.
okay with
2,
that?
3,
Any
I agree.
objections to option?
Pending numbers, then final floor
Sounds good.
decision.
Yep.
and-
Start with the plywood.
Good discussion.
So, and, you know, to wrap all this up, we've been at this project, I think, for 5 years.
Yeah.
I think we have. So I wanted to add a little bit of, I don't think anyone has seen the exterior concept yet of the elementary cafeteria, and I found this on Friday.
The rendering?
So,
Yeah.
first of all, we're gonna get an airport. There's a wetlands nearby or something.
Yeah, I'm getting a little bit.
So this is basically the front of the elementary, cafeteria is here.
That's awesome.
You can't really see it that well, but when we go down,
Whoa!
that's the front of the cafeteria.
Great. Wow!
Isn't that cool?
We added another floor on the building?
Basically, with just all windows, yeah, exactly.
That's
Yeah.
very cool.
And
And it kind of goes with the,
we have the library.
60s
on it.
architecture.
So yes, I do. So the library, of course, has that curved glass right now. And now it's gonna be flat, they'll put these pillars in to tie in.
Very cool.
Now, we didn't come up, no one, believe me, came up with, they had come up with these drawings and the concept prior. So, the walkway covering is here, you just don't see it, it's kind of grayed out, so you got a full effect in the front.
Yeah, that's if we took the walkway out.
Yeah, that's right, just right there.
So no one will ever see it anyway, so.
It's just a hole, yeah, no big deal. I like the airport idea.
Yeah, you like that?
Yeah.
A small runway in the back or by the
I
field.
love that idea.
Helipad?
Love it.
You could always use the hospital.
That's true.
They can use us.
Yeah. Well, that's very cool.
I did get a little worried when I was talking about, they took out all these windows and then they're adding all these windows. There will be AC in that area too, so. But with this coming out front here, it should block a lot of that sun.
Will it be blinds or shades or
I don't know, I haven't found that rendering yet. I'm hoping, yes, I am.
I haven't found that in there yet either.
Yeah.
Where it says anything about.
You can go to IKEA and get those paper shades, they work.
They're probably not hired for schools.
No, they're not at all.
So we'll keep you updated on that. Thank you for your willingness to stay a little longer and hash through this piece. It was, we needed to give them a timely response.
I think about a year ago, we were talking about a drainage problem in the parking lot with a sinkhole, kind of. Have we rectified that?
No, it's a big project, so that was something also that I know you were talking about earlier, why didn't we think of this before? It was not part of the original discussion when we talked about the project at that point. I think the last couple of years it's starting to spider a lot more and crack. But that, my understanding would be a complete removal of all of that, and then the subsurface has to be all reworked. When we talked to the committee a couple of months ago, that's on the radar. Because I don't think that's not gonna go away anytime soon, and the next project is gonna have to have additional paving in it, and that would be an area that is a really big concern. So, and I don't have I know that when Kenny was on the board, he had talked a lot about what would have to happen underneath there, but I think it's more than just paving, it's basically ripping all that out.
Oh, yeah, no, it was
Elaborate.
like drainage.
There's springs, like everywhere else here, and water just comes up out of the ground.
You get a lot of runoff from the back of that mountain too.
Yeah, you don't have mountains and not have problems.
Right, exactly. Look at that.
Not a problem that can't be solved,
Oh, exactly, but, yeah.
problem, yeah.
Yeah, between the water coming up and the water flowing down.
Oh, yeah.
So do we need to, plan the next meeting? Should we do
Yes.
April 12th?
Yeah, so we talked to Sue about that, because that would be, like I said, drop dead date, it gives us a little bit of time, and it'll be after break, it'll be the Monday after break.
All right, so is everyone available the Monday after break? It's the 12th to do this again.
So it was not a previously scheduled budget workshop. However, given the fact that we are still awaiting the state aid runs, we're still awaiting further definitive information on the stimulus package, that gives us a little bit more time. At this point, we have a balanced budget, so there's not a lot more work to do as far as that goes, but we'll certainly have more information at that point so that you'll have the information you need to approve the budget to go up for referendum. So April 12th, 5 o'clock? I will let Sue know.
They don't want to be alone.
All right,
Could we
everyone
possibly,
finish?
Kelly, can we do
What's
6 o'clock?
Yeah, can we do 6?
That's up to you, I can do 6.
I need 6.
6? No problem.
That works better for me.
You got
Just
it.
for that.
We'll do
No,
it.
that's good.
Can Sue
But I
set
read
up a
it.
meeting?
I like
I know it's an extra hour for you.
No, it's great.
If I
Absolutely.
were for another, if I
That
could
way
do
it's
for another week early, I think there's a calendar. It's
That
gonna
works out.
start causing me problems.
That's what I just, I thought there,
All right,
I'm good.
that sounds like I came up on it.
so
But
the
it's
12th at,
Oh,
so our next meeting is the 12th at 6.
Sean, is that
All right, are we finished with board business?
What is it?
hold on a second.
Okay,
hit it, yeah, probably. Cause it was, because of
The
it.
village meeting or trustee?
Yeah. What time is that, 7? I guess
this, I don't think how long do you think the next meeting is gonna take?
Not long.
Less than an hour,
Mhm.
half hour.
Hour, and I mean, if you can't stay to the bitter end, you can't stay to the end.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I'm okay.
Okay, so 6.
Yeah.
You okay with that? And 6?
Definite 5 to 7.
Oh, that's, oh gosh, oh yeah, no, don't worry about it.
Okay.
I mean, we're not even, we talked more about this than we did the budget, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
Alright, so that's it. Alright, may I have, anybody else need to say? Alright, a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Lucy, and a second? Second. Thank you, Tammy. Thank you everyone for joining us, have a wonderful evening.